Let's continue to talk a little week 4. Kyle Loomis stopping by from E2C Network. Kyle, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. And still wearing the Auburn orange proudly.
Yes, sir. You got to wear the orange proudly, even though this week, I don't know if Auburn fans have heard yet, we're trying this thing called the power stripe at the game where you have your white outs, your navy outs, orange outs, whatever. The power stripe is that iconic stripe look on the top of the helmets, and it's going to be quite the challenge to get the Auburn faithful to pull that off this week. So I don't know what section I'm in yet. You're supposed to wear a color by a certain section. We are notorious for kind of getting involved in these things. The whiteout's probably the best thing that we do, not to the level of Penn State, of course, but we'll see how this goes. It's something that you should probably all college football fans to check in on to see if Auburn can actually get on board with this, especially the students, because they don't have assigned seats. It's a free for all in there.
Well, I would think that one Hank Brown has his mind on other things besides what the student
Yes.
sections are going to be wearing. He's got to learn a playbook better than he has in the past. I'm sure he's
Yes.
been well studied on it prior to, but there's just something a little bit different about being the guy that's going to go out there and take the first snap versus the guy that's helping the coaching staff call in signals. So
Yes.
it's Hank Brown's team this weekend for the SEC opener against Arkansas. Peyton
Yes.
Thorne threw 4 interceptions against Cal. Your thoughts about one Hank Brown?
Well, here we are again. I feel like you and I have been talking for the last several years now at this point about Auburn changing quarterbacks. It's just been the story of revolving doors, so to speak, since Bo Nix. Yeah, the change is probably one that needed to be made in regards to production on the field. Now, whether it's the right change, it still remains to be seen. I, for one, am very pleased with what I saw out of Hank Brown in his first start against an opponent, though, that you should do that type of thing against. New Mexico is one of the worst defenses in FBS, so you would hope that your guy would throw that amount of touchdowns, no interceptions, be as proficient. I mean, all his stats looked pretty good. I think he had a few missed throws, a few underthrows, but we also were playing in one of the more torrential downpours that we've had since then. So not to make excuses, but to understand the context around maybe why he wasn't even more proficient on the stat line than he probably was, at least from that standpoint. So for me, I think it's a change that was very refreshing for a lot of the Auburn fan base, one that was wanted by a very loud, I would say probably majority at this point. And so far, we're heading in the right direction. Now, the test, as you brought up, is this Arkansas team. Whether you consider them one of the best in the SEC or not, it's still SEC caliber talent. And this is where the rubber meets the road for Hank Brown. Can he replicate what he did against New Mexico in this coming game?
There's always interest when there's a change at quarterback, and there's typically a change at quarterback, obviously, because the first guy is not getting the job done, meeting expectations. So there is a difference, though, when that guy that comes in is considered a stopgap versus whether he's considered to be the future.
Right.
So are
Yeah.
Auburn fans happy and optimistic because Hank Brown is supposed to be the future?
That's a great question. Some people made the point of why that you should start Hank Brown to find out if your quarterback of the future is on this roster, whether it was him or someone else. I think a lot of people have just grown tired of what they felt like was inconsistent play from Peyton Thorne. I, for one, was a big advocate of him, and as I know you and I have talked about a lot, that Auburn's offensive issues go much further beyond the quarterback than and even just Peyton Thorne or Robbie Ashford or TJ Finley. But at some point, you have to ask the question, can we do something different? Does a change need to be attempted? And I would say doing this early in the season is probably a smart thing to do before you get too heavy into the rest of the SEC play down the line when you go on the road to Georgia, to Missouri, to Kentucky, who we know and saw this week is at least susceptible to pull something special off or try to pull something special off. I, the change, I don't know that I'm one of those people that was hardcore that it needed to be made. I could have gone a little bit longer with Peyton Thorne to see what he did. I think he brings a dynamic to the game that Hank will not in terms of his legs, at least best that I've seen thus far. But what we need right now is maybe a little bit of confidence that maybe Peyton Thorne is lacking at this moment, considering some of the things that he's had to deal with. I don't know if this is where you wanted me to go with this question. I found some very interesting parallels between a point Bo Nix reached in his career with Auburn and Peyton Thorne, where things had gotten just kind of so bad in terms of support and things like that. And his confidence was just so lacking at the point. But you kind of have to make that change. If you remember, there was this homecoming game, which this was against Georgia State, where we nearly lost, and Bo had to be subbed out for TJ Finley, and he came in and led us down the field and won the game with in the waning seconds of it all. So, is the quarterback change? Is this of the future? I think that's where you were wanting me to go with this. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who still always think that the next great quarterback coming in the class, if they do come in this class, is going to be the person of the future. Is Walker White the person of the future? But I'm glad that we're at least giving Hank a shot to see if he is the solution, not just for the rest of this season, but for the coming seasons as well.
Yeah, there's this league that not many people know about. Yeah, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's called the NFL. And from what I understand, Bo Nix actually is good enough to play for one of those teams and was selected pretty high
Yeah.
again in some scrub league. So things
Yeah.
worked out pretty well for Bo Nix.
Oh, they did. They certainly did. It's amazing what happens when you get some blocking and you get a couple of athletes to actually, catch the ball when it hits them in the hands. And look, this isn't a one criticism on just one area, one group, all that stuff. The offense for Auburn's just been not clicking for the last several years and through multiple coaching changes as well. Bo Nix is definitely one of those you kind of look back and you go, hey, what might have been if we had been able to keep him around? But we'll see what happens here with Hank Brown. I'm optimistic about what's could transpire for him. I'm also optimistic about what happens if he maybe runs into some of the issues that other freshmen do, and things maybe get a little bit too fast for them. The beauty of it is that Hank's been around for a year. This isn't a true freshman. This is a redshirt freshman that's been here, been in the system. This is a Hugh Freeze guy. Hugh Freeze talked yesterday in his press conference about how he's been recruiting him since he was in the 10th grade when Hugh was at Liberty. So this is definitely, whether he was meant to be the starter originally or not, this is definitely a Hugh Freeze guy.
Kyle Loomis joining us from E2C Network to break down Auburn taking on Arkansas on the Plains SEC opener for both teams. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas, I saw them play a couple weeks ago against Oklahoma State, and they were by far the better team physically. They made a ton of mental mistakes in the fourth quarter that blew the game, but they racked up 650 yards of total offense.
Yep.
And outgained Oklahoma State, one of the better teams in the Big 12, we project, by about 280 yards. So with this running back room being as good as it is, and I've seen a couple plays out of Cam Coleman, I did not get to see much of the Cal game. I saw a little bit here and there.
You didn't miss much.
But I saw, yeah, I heard it was a pretty lackluster affair.
Yeah.
But that, at one point you guys had a play where you basically just handed a Cal defender the football to run back for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Sorry to remind you of that,
Yeah.
but that I've seen a couple plays where Cam Coleman looked like the guy that was the most talked about guy practically in the conference during the off season. And then again, with the running back room being what it is from a talent perspective, what else is going wrong?
What else is going wrong is, and let me back that up. It's not going wrong at this point. We just need it to do better. Like, this is the SEC. This is big boy football. This is minor leagues to that acronym that you brought up that somewhere out there, the NFL. You got to be able to push people around, create not just a pocket, but room to run. You saw in this game versus New Mexico, Jarquez Hunter, our running back, finally had the type of game that we know him for. 150 plus yards, a receiving touchdown, and a passing touchdown. And you turned around. I did this during the game. I was like, when did Jarquez pass 100? That's just what he does. He's a workhorse. And if you let him get going, give him some room to operate, he's going to tear you up no matter how good your defense is. So that's one area of it. Creating pass protection. I thought they did a pretty decent job with Hank in this game. No sacks on him. And he was rushed maybe a handful of times. In fact, one of the times that he was rushed was one of I thought, his better touchdowns when he rolled out to his right and hit one of our younger tight ends in the back of the end zone with defenders underneath that receiver as well, kind of threw it to the side and over the top of him with a little bit of pressure. So that offensive line is what's not been working. But we have been progressing slowly. Sure, that we just need that next step. The other thing is injuries too. Not again, I do not want this to sound like I'm making excuses. Cam Coleman, as you brought up, is actually not. He didn't play in this last game, and it's questionable if he will in this game. Trying to protect this young talent who was a little banged up during that Cal game. So I think that you've got some injuries at tight end. We just lost a guy for effectively the rest of the year. He may come back. One of our best blocking tight ends. He's a big old guy. And then at right tackle as well, we've had an injury that's been bugging a few others. So a little bit early in the season on the offensive side of the ball, we're having some of those things that happen regularly through the season when you couple that with inconsistencies at times on the offensive line play and then changing quarterbacks again. It can get a little volatile for the Auburn offense, but I choose to believe that things are going to be headed in the right direction here. It seems like at least we've got that energy back with Hank Brown at the helm.
Well, Auburn was definitely considered the better team than Arkansas during the offseason leading into 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas has put up a better effort against a quality opponent
Yep.
than Auburn did to date. Thus, Auburn's a 3-point favorite at home. 3 points is supposed to be the magic number in regards to Vegas's weight given to a home team. So basically, Vegas is telling us toss up. You guys decide because we have no idea who's better here. So this is a toss up.
Yes. I think based on what we see at Arkansas and Auburn, that's a fair assessment. I think you have to give Auburn a little bit of credit at home, which that line does, because this is Jordan Hare, and people have a tough time having good amounts of success. So you might beat us, but it's not going to be like you blow us out most of the time. Let's not talk about that Mississippi State game from several years back under Brian Harsin. Um, I'm okay with that line. To be honest, this could go a number of different ways. As I pointed out, Hank Brown had a great game. The offense had a great game against one of the worst defenses in FBS. Let's see what happens against Arkansas, against an SEC talented thing. The big issue is, as you brought up, their offense. Taylor Green, those running backs, can Auburn stop them? To me, it's more of a can you contain them on defense, and can you not let other things hurt you? Don't let Taylor Green and the wide receivers that they have, and I'm not aware of how strong those might be, but don't let them become the X factor in this game, because that might be if there is a weak point on Auburn's defense, is their defensive backs. A lot of young, new guys getting experience over there. Some injuries as well. We'll get back one of our guys that was out last game, who's one of our young talents at cornerback. That, for me, is the big question here. I think, can they eliminate the passing game as much as possible? Because even if you do a decent job against the running game, against Taylor Green, who's probably going to run it as well, they're still going to get some yards. They're still going to move down the field somewhat. So you got to make them start back there, win that field percentage, field positioning game, and just hope to contain that running game.
So, Kyle, for me, the narrative surrounding Auburn football since the last days of Gus Malzahn has been this has been a program and a team that has a few embarrassing moments, not like every week, just a couple embarrassing moments.
Sure.
Because of what they're supposed to be, which to me is a top 15 program in the history of the game.
Yep.
And then a couple opportunities, maybe more than a couple, of being able to do something special.
Right.
Having one of the elites on the brink of disaster for them and not being able to pull through and get the job done. And so what we saw a couple weekends ago against Cal to me was, again, this has nothing to do with the talent on the football field or the ability. So I'm going to say some derogatory things about Cal that is not directed at the coach or the team. Those are capable athletes.
Sure.
And it's easy for us to sit up, watch online, watch on TV, sit up in the press box and say, that's Auburn, that's Cal, what's going on here? But those athletes have to go out on the field. And I'm sure a lot of Auburn players would tell us, hey, that guy lining up across from me was really good.
Yeah.
But from a big picture standpoint, it's, oh, Cal, this refugee program that nobody cares about, nobody goes to the games, and all that stuff is a bit overplayed, but still, empty seats at the games. Nobody watches them on TV. They don't have a conference. Oh, they had to find refuge in the ACC. And it's just kind of this versus this SEC stalwart where the rabid fan base, we pour resources and everything into recruiting and facilities and building a team. And it's just kind of this dichotomy of two different approaches to football, and the one that apparently doesn't care less. Of course, we know that that's not the case with the coaches and players, but there's just not much attention given to that program. Goes in as a 2-touchdown underdog and wins the game.
Yep.
That's kind of an embarrassing moment for the Auburn faithful.
Yeah, embarrassing is a nice way of putting it. Auburn is supposed to take down opponents like this. And again, nothing taken away from Cal. In that situation, we can have all the fun in the world about them being in the Atlantic Coastal Conference. I hope y'all heard that. And all the other things that have happened with that. Gone are the days of Aaron Rodgers and Marshawn Lynch and all that kind of stuff. But they're a historic program with some great history as well. So to me, I do think that's overblown sometimes. But what you're hitting on is the narrative, and it's not just a narrative. It is a bit of a reality. Auburn, for whatever reason, will underplay to their opponent or overplay to their opponent. Note Georgia and Alabama last year. Now, it was within the confines of Jordan-Hare, which has some voodoo magic against Georgia and specifically Alabama for the most part, outside of one play last year, in the last two seasons. I can't explain it to you, Mark. I really can't, other than Auburn just loves playing in Auburn, and they just somehow find a way to be, I wouldn't say relevant to the game, meaning they either play down to who they're currently playing or play up to. It's always an interesting time. It's a roller coaster ride. But yes, you should be able to handle your business against Cal. We went to their place last year with a different offense that clearly wasn't going to work. That was the first sign it was going to work, was on the road at Cal last year. How do you not win at home? Again, most people will point to Payton Thorne, and you're right in saying that he was part of the problem, but he wasn't the only problem. It's a confounding nature of being part of the Auburn experience. I'll tell you that much.
All right, everyone. You can catch Kyle on E2C Network. It's right here on YouTube for everything Auburn, not just football, athletics across the board, the Auburn community, the Auburn family. But of course, there's a big football game to be played to open up the SEC against Arkansas on Saturday. Kyle, appreciate you stopping by as always for breaking down Auburn football for us.
Thank you so much for having me, and War Eagle.